everyone, welcome back if you've been here before. If not, welcome, I'm happy to have you. As always, timestamps are below in the description and in the video timeline if you want to skip the intro. Today I want to talk about a conclusion I came to when I was looking back on my childhood. As the term pick-me girl became more popular and I learned the definition, I realized I definitely used to be one. Used to being the key word. I want to explain that change in mentality from pick me, quote unquote, to how I view things today. There wasn't a lot of vulnerability in my house growing up. I believe it was really just a lack of communication skills between anyone. I don't believe my parents would have thought less of me for showing emotion and being vulnerable, but not seeing that behavior displayed by my primary role models, I ended up internalizing that it was not acceptable. At school, kids were also just discouraged from crying. Generally, it seemed negative emotions were to be punished or discouraged or ignored. And that just reinforced how I handled vulnerability. In elementary school, I happily wore dresses, I had hair down to my waist, and some of my friends were considered tomboys, but I didn't really have a pull towards any particular gender for friends at this point. But that slowly began to change in middle school. In middle school, I became more favorable towards shorts and pants instead of skirts and dresses. At some point, I cut my hair all the way up to my chin because I was tired of taking care of it and brushing it, and it was constantly knotted and frizzy and thick. And unfortunately, that request was just made as is. There wasn't a good style given to help manage that thick of hair at that length. It was just cut the same length, straight edge all the way around. Girls around me began to mature and use makeup, and I wasn't allowed. And I think that began to fester my negative self-image between how I didn't like my haircut and how I began comparing myself to the girls around me, and just my previous experience with being shunned by primarily girls since elementary school. I began to make friends with more boys. As I got older, I internalized observations even further. Girls that wore very feminine clothes and makeup often coincided with the same girls that had unfriendly attitudes towards others. It seemed in the media feminine women were considered less than through heavy criticism and judgment, and my friend group would put them down amongst themselves. I would be praised by others for doing more traditionally masculine things, like being able to catch or throw a football, which was something I actively practiced with my father just so I could show off that skill. I didn't even like football, but I liked the praise. I liked being, quote, not like the other girls. And it continually got worse in high school. High school gave pretty heavy steam to the rolling snowball that was the pick-me attitude. By high school, I had almost exclusively male friends, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 female friends. But even those female friends shared the same attitudes. We were tough. We didn't wear girly clothes. We didn't start drama. We had common sense and were smart. I understand now, obviously, these things are not exclusive to a subset of a gender, but we had a very us versus them mindset. I was given further praise by my male friends for being the girl that they could get along with and roughhouse with and hang out with and like similar things. I continued to align with the core beliefs against certain subsets of women, bitterly opposing them, and would push myself to do things that the people who felt this way enjoyed. Looking back, I definitely had a degree of a misogynist mindset. I wanted to continue to be the girl that was different, that was strong and smart like the boys. The girl that wasn't like the other girls because other girls were awful and didn't have value, and I definitely wasn't like them. My issues with vulnerability only multiplied exponentially because of this. I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't know how to ask for help. I had an irrational fear of looking stupid or weak. I felt I always had to be strong, and that caused a whole other stack of problems that maybe we'll dive into on another video. But when I left my hometown to go to college, I was able to separate myself from that environment and those friends and do some soul searching. So in college, it was most literally like a fresh start. While it was only 2 hours away from my hometown, I knew nobody. I was able to interact with so many different kinds of people, and I began to challenge my mindset about femininity being weak and inferior. I began to explore interests in clothing that I genuinely enjoyed, first doing it with someone else and someone else's praise in mind. I still primarily chose pants as my average wear, but I slowly adopted dresses and other more traditionally feminine clothing items in the styles I enjoyed. I liked dark aesthetics and began accumulating a mix of clothing to fit that. Pants and shorts, dresses, skirts, tights, boots, flip-flops, corsets, literally a little bit of everything, and it felt great. I began to find power in femininity instead of shame and something to be avoided. I wore as I pleased based on the occasion and how comfortable I wanted to be. I began creating healthy support network connections with all types of friends. Throughout the years, I did a lot of introspection, and by the end of college, I actually ended up with more female friends than male. The first time I experienced that in my whole life. I began to try and work on my communication with all my friend support. I was praised for being myself, my sense of humor, being supportive, and my aesthetic style that I chose for myself. We accepted each other's differences in interests and personal styles. And I'm happy to say I have the most diverse group of friends I've ever had in my entire life across interests, aesthetics, races, genders, sexualities, and everything in between. And I'm so glad I went through that personality change. Putting down other women isn't productive nor kind, and it came from a bitter place where it was easier to be cruel to others than address my own issues and insecurities. And it didn't allow me to be my true self. Just bad consequences all the way around. Taking pride in being negative towards others is a shitty personality trait. And there's still work I have to do. I still have pangs of that old mindset, seeing women in certain types of clothing or with certain spoken phrases. But I mentally slapped myself on the wrist and correct that thought. Because that's not the person I want to be. Life is far too short to spend it in service of impressing misogynists. So now, let's talk about piece pros and cons. So first con, I'm gonna say line work. So this line work was done actually with black ink and like a physical liner brush, not a micron pen or like a brush pen or anything like that. So it was literally a brand new experience for me. The reason I ended up trying that is when I use the micron pens, I have to push with a decent amount of pressure, and it usually ends up hurting my wrist, especially for more line intensive stuff. The brush pen that I got isn't terrible, but it does bleed a little bit into the watercolor paper. I kind of went back and forth on that. But then I saw this black ink, which is waterproof and light fast, and I bought a couple of liner brushes and decided to give that a try. The challenge comes from not being able to put so much pressure as what I'm used to. So I have to be able to be precise without just jamming the brush into the paper. So I think it will be a better method overall. It's just kind of difficult for me right now to just make completely smooth strokes with combating with, I guess, that lack of control or the different way that I have to do it. Also, con number 2, background glazing, unfortunately. So in my last video, I made a palette and a glazing chart, and I just didn't put For the background, I layered 2 colors and I just didn't put enough of one color versus the other. So it basically looks purpley, I guess, instead of like the in-between color that I was going for. So that was a little disappointing. For pros, shading. I like that there isn't too many hard lines with how I did the shading. Sometimes when I do the method that I primarily use for shading, sometimes it dries and you can see like a small little water line there. But that's actually been fairly minimal in this piece, so I was really happy about that. And of course, my second pro, skull texture. Skull texture is just something that I guess is a little bit hard to mess up. It's super freeform, which is a good practice for me, being so rigid in like how I do things, because I cannot guarantee how it's gonna look. You just have to do it. It's very unpredictable in the way the water will flow or how it will dry. But so far, every skull that I've done, I have enjoyed the method quite a bit, so I'm gonna stick to that. And that's all I have for you guys today. I have this original piece available for sale in my Ko-fi shop if anyone is interested. Let me know your thoughts or experiences as well with the Pick Me concept. Thank you to all my supporters. I appreciate you all so much. And as always, thank all of you so much for watching. I hope everyone has a great day, and I will see you all soon. Stay different.